Because we realized that a lot of people have already started going back to school, and which was a surprise to me when my sister-in-law sent me. I was like, "What? We got like a whole. It's post Labor Day for us in the Northeast, kids. So like, I don't know what's happening in Florida, but yeah. So we're basically heading back to school. This is a time that all of us who have had to navigate this, as parents in particular, also comes with a lot of stress. So what can you talk to us about today that can help some of us ease the stress as we head into this next phase of life?
It is back to school. My little homie, my youngest, Apollo, he started fourth grade. Today was his first day back to
Wow.
school. So for the last couple of weeks, as a parent, me and his mom have been discussing, we've been doing like, they send you the list of stuff you got to buy.
Yeah.
There's the aftercare schedule, the pickup,
Mm.
there's the soccer, baseball, uniforms, kicks. So if you think about it, it's not just like show up to school, like, all right, school starts today, right? So there's a whole preparation in terms of like getting the kids ready for school, them personally meeting their needs and the requirements of the school, adjusting your schedules now because,
Right.
right, ain't no more summer camp. There's none of that, right? Summer camp, you can leave them there till 5. You straight. And getting back on the sleep schedule. So, like
Right.
for us, they've been kind of kicking it, chilling. Like you ain't got to really get up that early in the morning. And so
Yep.
now it's even trying to transition them back to a schedule that's conducive with what they're going to be having to do going forward. So all of that brings about a great deal of stress in families, both on the parent side and on the kid side. And that manifests itself in a number of ways, both on the parent side and on the kid side. And there's ways to identify that based on gender, based on age groups, based on behavior or poor coping mechanisms. So, like, you can actually look at your child or yourself and say, okay, now I know why I feel this way or why I'm acting this way. And a lot of it has to do with this period in time that we're going through, and you guys are going to be going through in a month.
Yeah, yeah, and the sleep schedule alone is ridiculous. I still feel like we're trapped by COVID in some ways because during COVID, like I don't know about your family, but like sleep time, bedtime, time became a flat circle. And
Yeah,
especially when there were like weeks at a time when the kids weren't in school because the nobody knew how to get the computers and the systems
yeah,
working. And so their sleep schedule is stupid.
jack,
Like it makes no
jacked
sense.
up.
And so like during the summer, like during the school year, we very much try to get back into the regular sleep time schedule. But during the summer, I do feel like we revert back to like pandemic when it was like you woke up 3 o'clock in the morning and you're I'm about to confess. Your kid is talking to their friend at 3 o'clock in the morning because like no one's got school, no one was leaving the house, and like time again a flat circle. So it's weird, and trying to reclaim a sense of normalcy in this very unnormal moment. It is a stressful thing. And then aftercare, we realize, yo, our daughter now she's in middle school, so like walking home is a conversation. I'm like, not my baby. Like, it's too far to walk. Like, I don't know about this. And
Go
then
pick her
like,
up.
who gonna pick her up? And so yeah, so it's all of these stresses that you often aren't thinking about when you're in the height of like summertime vacation. So talk to us. How can CBD help us to show up better for our kids? How can it help our kids show up? Because I know you also have products that have zero THC, which is the
Yeah.
component of cannabis that will get you high, that is more appropriate for children. Give us a sense as to what we need to know.
So when we look at what happens, right? So we have the sleep disturbances, obviously, right? We talked about that, and there's a lot of reasons for that. We've talked about sleep a lot, but then the behavioral things, right? So if you look at like younger kids, let's say grade school level, like he's gonna be 9 in a couple of weeks, Apollo is. Like those kids, when school starts for them, they experience a different kind of stress, and it's based upon being in a new environment. So it's like I'm in a new class, I'm in a new teacher, I gotta kind of like acclimate myself to these strange surroundings, right? And
Right.
now I'm not hanging out with my mom or my dad or grandma, whoever, so there's a bit of that separation anxiety as well because the summer is more fluid. So you are hanging out a little bit more, you've been on vacation, like so you've had this long period of time where it's uninterrupted contact, and then boom, here you go off. And so those kids will have like this kind of anxiety from trying to adjust to new circumstances. And between boys and girls, the boys will not express that as much as the girls. And so what you'll see when girls are experiencing the anxiety, all right, they will tend to express that in terms of depression or in terms of like, kind of being solemn or quiet, right? Whereas the boys, when they're experiencing these feelings, they start to act out, right? So they internalize it, don't have a way to express it, and they start misbehaving, right? And it's them trying to cope with all this stuff, right? And then when you get to like older groups, like teenagers, adolescents, right? They're experiencing a different kind of stress from it. So then you start going into like when we as parents, unfortunately, do this, like, yo, what are you going to do when you grow up? You got to make a plan. What's up with your grades? And they doing the PSAT, you're going to do the press. So they start to feel the pressure of these expectations and like meeting certain standards. So they feel a great deal of pressure like, hey, I got to start doing this. And then they get bombarded with that. And so being able to cope with those pressures tend to sometimes force them or lead them to maladaptive strategies, which can sometimes lead to like drug use, experimenting with marijuana, drinking, and other things because the stress is overwhelming. And then we have, of course, every time we talk about this, we talk about race and socioeconomic status, which overlaps for us. When you talk about that, you add something else because all the things that we already have to deal with in the land of the colonizer, as the colonized and the exported colonized, is the financial part of things, right? So you got to buy books, sneakers, all this stuff. All right. If you ain't got it like that, that's difficult. So on the parent side, that's a hardship. And on the kids' side, too, I think back in the day in New York, I know when I grew up, we didn't have uniforms. So if you ain't
Oh, really?
come, there was no
Whoa,
uniforms when I
that's a
was
whole
going to
other
school.
level.
Yeah, there was no
Yeah,
uniform. So your clothes, like if you wasn't dressed right, they was on you, relentless, right?
yeah,
So your
yeah.
sneakers had to be fresh, your new Pumas or your shell top Adidas or shell toe, or whatever people call them. And so there's the stress of that, the technology needs, buying computers, doing all that stuff. So the financial aspect of that is very rough. And at times, the strain of the parents puts strain on the kids. So not only do they have like their situation, but then the parents are like, man, I can't afford this. Like, oh, they want me to buy this, that, to do this. Like, we ain't got it like that. And so there's all these things going on. And oftentimes you wind up seeing like, hey, the family's in disarray. Kids are not doing well. Parents are not doing well. We're not sleeping well. Everybody's on angst. Somebody's getting bad grades at school. A principal called, this dude's acting up. She don't want to talk to nobody. She just being a moody teenager. Nobody, right? And so you get all of this stuff, and we're trying to find a solution for that. And so
Hmm. Uh-oh, did we lose Dr. Damas? Oh no. Oh, he froze. Damn it. Wait, you froze, Doc. You froze. You were in the middle of the point, and like the stress of all the stress you were talking about stressed
yeah.
out your Zoom connection.
So I was saying that, understanding that this ain't just random stuff, right? The kids are not just acting up for no reason. That you don't feel awkward as a parent or stressed out for no reason. There's reasons behind it. And the better we are at understanding that and learning that, so it's not just like, oh man, the kid's just acting stupid or like, yo, he just want to be moody or whatever. The better chance we have at doing things or finding interventions that are going to make things more productive for us and our children, as opposed to leaving them up to their own vices or disregarding them. And that's when you get like, hey, the substance abuse, the experimentation, sometimes you get your bouts of depression, poor academic performance, so that stuff is all interrelated.
Yeah, yeah. It's so important because for a lot of us, we don't often recognize the acting out as stress related, and we will interpret behaviors from our kids as a grab for power when it's really a cry for help. And that's something that's extraordinarily important. And so even outside of the back to school context, a lot of times stress in our kids shows up in these ways that look like bad behaviors and them
Yeah.
not listening to you. And but the reality is they don't necessarily have the language, nor do they have the freedom of linguistic use in conversation with their parent, who is also their authority figure, in the way that they might with one of their peers. So I think I really appreciate your call to being mindful of that. And speaking of being mindful, there are a variety of techniques that I know you've talked about in
Yeah.
your latest article, that sort of looks at some of the ways that we can address some of these stressors. Would you mind taking us through some of those that we
Yeah.
can get a sense as
So
to
you,
a
yeah.
holistic approach?
So I always like I'm really big into like the holistic approach to things. I don't want to look at CBD or cannabis as like your magic bullet, like fix all your
Right.
problems by taking this herbal remedy or whatever, because that's not the reality of life. That would be like me prescribing a pill to you. Same thing, right?
Right.
So
Right.
the idea that there's this one-stop solution that's gonna like fix all your problems is misguided. And so we got to really think about how we're existing in this society and the way that we're living and behaviors that we're engaging in and things that we're doing that could be detrimental to us, and also things that we're not doing that we could actually benefit from. And so, like you just said, the ability to communicate, right, like with a kid at their level using their words is really important. Many of us grew up in a setting. I could say for myself personally, it was a very authoritative setting, right? So my pops was like I never spoke to my pops about what I was feeling. He was like, get to work and shut your mouth, right? Listen, yeah, I don't want to hear nothing from you. Like, and my mom's, she was a little bit more kinder, but it was really like, yo, did you do your schoolwork? All right, that's it. Like, I don't want to hear, I got my own problems, homeboy. Like, ain't nobody got time for it. You want to tell me how hard it is for you? Let me tell you how hard it is for you. I just worked double. You know what I'm saying? Who's going to pay these bills? And so that's the reality. And so being able to understand that that is an unsustainable system for all of us, working yourself to the bone. It's unsustainable. Not communicating your thoughts and feelings. That's unsustainable. All right. Taking a moment to yourself and actually acknowledging what you're thinking and feeling. We don't give ourselves enough peace. We don't, right? Because it's like grind, 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 hustle, hustle, hustle. And we impart that into our kids who are not ready for that. They're not ready. And then we're telling like, no, no, no. It's hard out here. You're going to have to work twice as hard. You're black, right? You have to work twice as hard to get, the same reward. I mean, we inundate them with that. Right? And
Yeah.
so, you know, separating ourselves from that mindset makes a big difference. Not putting as much expectations and pressure on, like, yo, you got to score S and this and this, or else you ain't going to make it, kid. You got to be this. And so that's important. So mindfulness in terms of yoga, in terms of meditation, in terms of disconnecting from technology, which is a poison that is really, taking off with the TikTok and Instagram and Snap. Taking time. I do that with my kid. I'm like, yo, bro, you think I'm trying to be hard on you? I'm looking out for you. We are unplugging for the next 4 hours. I know you
Yeah.
want to, I know you want to plug back in, but we ain't doing it, right? Because I got to look out for you.
Good on you, because it just gets harder the older that they get. Like,
Yeah.
and now we have a 17-year-old who is going to be 18 before he finishes high school, and we have to have a different conversation, right? So now it's about like what is going to be, as you are deciding how to spend your time, what is going to be in your best interest. But we can't. He's not like my 10-year-old who I can be like, give me the device right now,
Yeah.
give it
Yeah.
here. Like, it's
Run
different.
that.
And I could, but like saying to a 17-year-old, 18-year-old child, give it to me, like that is not planting seeds for successful relationships with your children going forward. And if you got to pull that sort of language at that age, you may have missed some steps a little bit younger.
Correct.
And I'm talking to myself as well, as much as I'm talking to anybody else. But there has to be relationship in a different way, because mutual respect matters differently, or
Yes.
it shows up differently, I should say, when your child is older. So I'm glad that you're handling that at the early age, because now our conversation with our oldest is more on the lines of, these are terrible practices for your success. You have said this is what your goal is. You got SAT, you got all these things that are happening your senior year. Let's position yourself for the best success, and that will mean not scrolling as much. That will
Yeah.
mean unplugging. I saw a video of this sister, a young sister, who said, "Yeah, I just got into this school, and I know it's going to be really hard, so I got rid of my smartphone smartphone and I got a flip phone because I knew that all I was going to do was scroll on my smartphone. And so she did what we had actually forced our kids to do when they were young. We gave them flip
But
phones.
it's good. The phones are like, it's like a Pandora's box that we're just becoming aware of. Like, oh
Yeah.
man, we may have like started something that we can't control with the
Yep.
phones. And the
Yep.
second thing, besides the mindfulness practices, which means acknowledging your feelings, your thoughts, the difficulties, taking a break, not trying to push yourself beyond your limits, or setting standards that are like unreachable, or if you reach them, they'll crush you in the process, right? So you'll never be happy. They're not imparting that on your kids, treating the kids, like you just said, like human beings and not like some disregarded entity that like, should be seen and not heard, like we know.
Right.
Um, there's
Right.
also the big part is nutrition, which again, in our communities is really, really, really important. And so there's like, so the mindfulness stuff, so everything we talk about, there's been a lot of research on this in terms of how effective it is in managing the stress and anxiety of our life, in particular in going back to school. So they've done, because this is not like a thing, they've done studies in terms of like when school classes should start. The school should start later. So there are states that have laws
Yeah.
that the school can't start. And there's a reason for that, because the kids need to sleep, and
Right.
you know, the nutrition part of it. And so being aware of that as the school starts, our schedule gets crunched, and then the food becomes a secondary thing, right? So you're eating poor quality food, and then that in turn results in poor mental capacity, low energy. It could lead to like obesity, poor eating habits. That is something that requires some planning, right? So if you're all stressed out, the last thing you're going to do is like, oh, I'm going to make this nutritious meal for you, right? You'll be like, we're just going to get whatever we can get on our way there, or something prepackaged that I bought that was frozen that can pop into the toaster or the microwave. This very nutrient poor as opposed to nutrient dense. There are studies that discuss something called the gut brain connection or the gut brain axis. And basically, that says that what you put into your stomach directly affects your mind, not only in your intellectual capacity, but in your psychological capacity as well, right? So it's not only your ability to
Wow.
process information, but the thoughts that you're having and the way that you're having these thoughts. And so if you're not eating well and making sure that you're having a healthy meal and your kids are having healthy meals, it ain't going to turn out well for you, right? So even
Mm.
that makes a little bit of a difference. If you're like the kid is hopped up on Pop Tarts or whatever, early in the morning, something really sugary, that could lead to behavioral issues, for example,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Or it could lead to lack of concentration when you get that crash from the sugar,
Yep.
right? So now you're all hopped up, and 2 hours later, your insulin release has brought you back down. Then they're like, this kid ain't paying attention to class, right? And it's
Right.
like, so these kind of things, like before you even consider like, taking supplements and things like that, there are behavior modifications and things you can do in a household that can get you back on the path that you want. And then you start looking at, all right, so how can I do, I'm doing all this stuff, but I want something that can maybe help with the sleep or something that can help with the anxiety. Then we start talking about like CBD and cannabis and all that good stuff.
Right. So I love that. And again, this is something that you've been very consistent on. We never just start with and here's CBD to solve all your problems. There's always these other processes. And for parents who are trying to think about what sort of mindfulness techniques that you can use in your household, I will just suggest a couple, or one in particular that's very simple. My son and I, when he was much younger, we got into a habit of slow, deep breathing. And we would say, okay, we started out with like 20 slow, deep breaths, and we would breathe in together, breathe out together. This is when he was like 6, maybe 5 or 6, and we would do slow, deep breaths. And then we would work our way up to 100, and we would sit down at night, take slow, deep breaths, and didn't have to have like a whole meditative script or like a conversation or anything, which you can, but it's very, very simple. Slow, deep breathing provides so much rest for your body. It allows for clarity of thought, and it allows for a lot of the stressors that you experience to have a physical release, which is extraordinarily important. And then if you need, like YouTube got a whole lot of
Yeah.
mindful meditation meditations for
Yeah.
children. Like there's one I used to do with my daughter called Be the Frog or Be the, and it's like you pretend you're a frog floating on a lily pad. And that sort of imaginative exercise, it's nothing spiritual. It's not going to take your name out the Lamb's Book of Life. It's just literally allowing your brain a mini vacation, a bit of respite so that the stress that your brain is navigating can minimize just a bit. So I appreciate
It's
that.
perfect.
But having done those things, and
Yeah.
recognizing there's still a need, that's
Yeah.
when, if I'm understanding you correctly, it's appropriate to consider incorporating CBD.
Your CBD, exactly. And so, again, just reiterating for some of the new listeners or people who don't get it, right? So, in the cannabis plants, these cannabinoids, you have the THC and the CBD, right? And so, the CBD is basically everything but the high, right? So, it's everything that you would get in the cannabis plant but the high. Interesting thing, too, I was reading an article this morning and it talked about how the cannabis plants now are kind of like these bubonic strains. And I always tell my patients and customers that like the stuff that you're getting now is off the chain in terms of the THC content. And that's going back to just like the 80s and 90s. So now the average THC content in marijuana, like weed that you'll get in a dispensary or even from the street, 15 to 18% THC. In the 80s and 90s, it was 1 to 4% THC. So you're
Wow.
getting this stuff that's 15 times more potent now than it was just 30 years ago. And then
And a
obviously,
lot of it's dirty.
yeah,
A
and then
lot of it is
it
very
can be
dirty. We've
dirty.
had
Yeah,
Kevin Middleton on. Yeah, Kevin Middleton from Cannabis Labs. He came on, and actually, I think we just loaded that video up on the Lurie Daniel Favorite Show YouTube page, where he talks about. We had a lengthy conversation about these articles coming out of LA Times that talked about the fact that the weed we're getting is more potent, that as you just said, but it's also dirtier. Even coming out of a dispensary, it's
correct.
often dirtier because of the way it's stored and the practices for handling it. So there's a reason why elders say today's weed wasn't like yesterday's weed.
It
Like
is not, right?
things have
So it's
changed.
not.
Yeah.
It's very corporate, so there's a lot of corporate interests in it now. So we sometimes it's presented to us in a manner that it's all this kumbaya, feel good here. We're breaking barriers, like weed, and it's like nah, there's still greedy venture capitalists behind it and getting involved. And once there's a lot of money to be made, this is America. Right. So let's not fool
Yeah.
ourselves. Right. It ain't
Right.
that sweet out here. So the high levels of THC, first of all, lead you to potential for addiction. So there is something called cannabis use disorder. We called them weed heads back in the days, pot heads. Some people call them, other cultures in America call them stoners, right? People who are just like really addicted to this and this is their thing. And the higher the THC content is, the greater your risk of getting involved in that being a substance use disorder. And that's not going to help you or your kids manage your stress because it makes you less productive, right? And so we don't really want to do that, right? So in terms of like managing stress and anxiety, I always tell people you don't need a hammer to fix every problem, right? It does not require a hammer. And the weed nowadays is a big hammer, right? Sometimes you need something with a finer touch, a more delicate touch. And that's where you go with the CBD, which has very, very low THC, less than 1% THC. So it's not going to affect your cognition, but it gives you the same anxiety relief. It helps you with the sleep. It helps you with the stress, and it helps you with the focus without the addiction potential, which is really, really, really important, especially when you're thinking about taking care of kids, being productive, or even giving it to your kids, as we mentioned, because we have zero THC options. And that's really, really important because there are studies that have shown that any substance that you give that's mind altering to the growing brain, right? So your brain keeps growing, is developing until you're about 22 years old. So if you're
Right.
giving any mind altering thing at high or frequent high amounts or frequent amounts, it's going to change the development of that brain. And then it's also going to put you at risk for addiction. And usually if that addiction happens, it's polysubstance addiction. So it's not like, hey, I'm just, doing this. Now it's weed and cigarettes, weed and alcohol, or anything else. So you don't want to go down that road unless it's absolutely necessary, like it's a life-threatening condition or all the other medications have failed and you're like, hey, let's try the THC. So CBD is a great tool to have in your kind of kit, your medicine kit that can give you these results. It's part of your wellness routine, mindfulness, your dietary practices, your communication skills. It's part of the whole thing that you're going to use put together so that you can have this outcome that you want, which is the kid is happy, they're doing well in school, you're less stressed, right? You're feeling good, life is good, you're not disheveled, as opposed to like, damn, these kids getting on my last nerves. I can't take it. We don't want that for you. I don't want it, all right?
That's
And
right.
it
Nobody
can
wants that
cause stress amongst the parents too, which is another thing, which we don't want either. So you don't want the whole household in disarray. And CBD
Yeah.
can help you with that. There you go.
No, and this is important because the reality is we're at a time where, again, I think people are open to the idea of holistic healing in ways like we haven't been in my lifetime before. I don't want to say never because there was a whole time before Western medicine where everything was holistic in nature. So for parents who are thinking about, because you have products that have THC, you've got products that have just CBD, you've got the full spectrum, the I don't know what the other types of spectrum are, but you've got these things.
Broad spectrum, and
Oh yeah,
isolate.
broad spectrum. Okay, there we go. I knew it was something. And I know that I have tried you have the hemp oil capsules, which again, a non-THC capsule that allows you the benefits of CBD. You've got the hemp oil gummies, which are actually also tasty for those of you who like something to
And they're
chew on.
vegan.
And they're vegan. Well, there's that. So you really aren't just talking about it, you being about it. And when it comes to parents who are preparing to go back into school, is there a particular recommendation that you have for parents when it comes to one product versus another? If parents are thinking about something for their child, what guideposts should they be thinking about if they think that, okay, my child could also benefit from this non-THC, will not get you high, will not disrupt your cognitive growth and development? What are some of the questions that those parents should ask themselves to see if this might be a good option for their child?
So, I would
Oh,
definitely.
and sorry, we only have like 90 seconds. Also,
All
that
right, let's do it.
sorry.
So, I'd like to recommend for if you're going to consider something for your kids, something with zero THC, just the CBD. So our broad spectrum gummies, and those you can cut in half, so you can kind of control the dose. So like half a gummy would be good just to chill the kid out. I help my kid go to sleep with a full gummy. I'd be like, yo, here's your gummy, homeboy. It's time for you to chill out. We're bringing this bad boy down, right? So those are really good. You could send it to them in their lunchbox. I have parents who send it if they already have medication or whatever they're taking. You could send it with them and make sure that the teacher has it and say, hey, just give it to them. So I have some parents who like have a little plan with the school nurse or the teacher, and like, hey, make sure they get this gummy after lunch because that's when they start losing. Like that's when they lose their stuff, right? So it's like
Right.
after lunch, give them a gummy so they can make it the rest of the afternoon. So, but any questions I would say on a case-to-case basis, feel free to call us. So I'll just give you the numbers: 833-362-3262, 833-362-3262. We love answering questions because you inspire us to like think of solutions and things to talk about on air, because I'm sure everybody else is having the same questions. And also you can go to the website, drdamas.com, DOCTORDAMAS.com, or DRDAMAS.com. Anything you buy, put Lurie in as a code, LURIE. We'll hook you up. And yeah, man, hit us up. For real, for real. We love when you guys call because it helps us like do the right thing, take away a lot of like the questions and like the ambiguity, and we can get like the solutions and sometimes we don't have the solution, but at least you'll know that this ain't the solution that you're looking for. You don't waste your time barking up the wrong tree.
Right. And knowing what's not going to work is just
Yeah.
as important as knowing what is going to work,
Sure.
depending on the circumstance and the situation. Dr. Damas, as always, you always provide us information that we can use immediately. And I have on good authority. In fact, we have had callers to this show who have called up during this segment to say just how wonderful the customer service at your organization is, which is important because a lot of people are trying this as an option for the very first time, and being able to talk through all of the many diseases and physical maladies modalities that we discuss in this segment, and the way that CBD may or may not, because it's not always, may or may not be able to help is really important for people. And I think it opens us up even more to this idea that there is healing available to us, even if it's coming in a package and from a particular part of our society that we're not necessarily aware of.